Good morning, everybody. You are listening to Procure Smarter with Dr. Sharon Cook. And today we're going to talk about the push to order from U.S. manufacturers. Stay tuned. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the big push for hoteliers and buyers to order from vendors who are manufacturing stateside. And I'm here to tell you this is a pretty complicated topic. I put a call out on Instagram a couple nights ago asking if you were a manufacturer based in the US or you were a manufacturer's rep, then I would love to talk to you. And boy, did you come out. For those of you who are on Instagram, come check us out at Procuresmart. This morning, I spoke to Leah Phillips with the Delos Company, and boy, are they on fire. And she was telling me that recently they are so much on fire that they have taken delivery of 2 new machines and just ordered 3 more. Leah was telling me that Delos doesn't really have an overseas counterpart. And that is strictly due to the raw materials that they are using. You see, Delos uses only 2 fibers in their rugs. 1, which is wool, and 2, which is a product called Equinel. And that is from a Georgia company called Aquafil. And Equinol is fibers created from recycling fishing nets. Now, this took me down a whole different rabbit hole, so stay tuned for a whole podcast on this. According to Leah, today you either mass market like Amazon or you're custom. And Delos started in 2008 as custom. And while being a U.S. manufacturer was often seen as an after-sell feel-good moment, it really came down to price. But now they are seeing that it's so expensive to ship from China, ease is the biggest selling point. And they would like to say they are shipping their rugs in 6 weeks. According to Leah, a lot of small companies out there saw this trend to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and they have taken steps to shore up their infrastructure, and they're prepared for it. Next, I spoke to Andrea Hubbard, who has worked for 20 years on the manufacturing side of the interior products business, and in her experience, it's much more complicated than simply switching from offshore to onshore. I was able to get her on a Zoom call, so let's listen to what she had to say. Great. Well, it's very nice to finally kind of sort of meet you.
Right.
So thanks for reaching out. So you had some really good feedback, and I just kind of wanted to dig into it a little bit.
This is going to be so interesting to hear everyone's perspective.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of the things that you said that caught my attention was that this whole issue about bringing manufacturing back to the States is very product dependent. And you had talked about like textiles versus case goods. So can we just talk about that for a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So in textiles, it's very layered, like in many products. But with textiles, it's going to typically be less expensive to import. And that's going to be due to several factors. If you're talking about containers and shipping things over from offshore, the amount of fabric you can fit in a container is really going to lead to, where your cost differentiation is. But also it's U.S. textile manufacturing that went offshore years ago, long before I think many of the other products that we use in the industry have gone offshore. In the U.S., there's very few what you call cradle to grave capabilities left. So there's going to be very few people creating the raw materials in the U.S. that eventually turn into the finished textile. So very few yarn makers left, very few weavers of gray goods. There's a handful of dyeing finishing plants left here in the U.S. So onshoring your textiles would take a much longer time and a much longer or larger investment.
Right. And that's mostly because we don't have the infrastructure anymore for that, right?
Correct.
We don't have the factories.
Correct. And I would say that started leaving the U.S. 30 to 40 years ago.
Okay. So, but case goods, now that's a different story.
Case goods, I feel, are a different story. I work with a case goods manufacturer right now who works in high-end retail fixtures, like think wood fixtures in Gap or Old Navy, and then they also do case goods for hotels as well. Um, in their case goods or fixtures for the retail community, they are getting projections where they have and know the amount of stores that they need to supply, and they need to turn those in 6 to 8 weeks. So they work their supply chain backwards. They make sure they have their raw materials in the United States so that they can produce those in 6 to 8 weeks. But the difference is if a hotel called us tomorrow and said, we need this in 6 to 8 weeks, we wouldn't have that supply chain work backwards in order to turn in that same lead time.
Right.
Where are all of the raw materials for those case goods coming from? The majority of those are going to be offshore as well. So it's really a program versus a project. And that's where the difference in that lead time comes in.
So let me ask you that. So if you have it in the pipeline, if you have projected this project, you can turn it around in about 6 to 8 weeks because you have been able to secure the raw material.
Correct.
If a new project comes on board, you're probably not going to be able to offer 6 to 8 weeks. So what is that timeline looking like?
That's a really good question and very layered as well. I would say pre-COVID, if you wanted something produced in the United States and you were back sourcing your raw materials, you would be in, that 8 to 12 week lead time. I would say today, with current supply chain issues, with freight issues, with labor issues, you're looking more in a similar lead time, I would say, of 12 to 14, 12 to 16 weeks.
Okay. So, as a buyer, that's not drastic.
Correct.
When I have talked to our Asian or Vietnam suppliers, they are, because of container issues and because of labor issues, they're really pushing out 24 weeks. So
yes, it really depends on the scale and the scope and where those raw materials are coming from. It's also, some people will say, oh, it's all about forward planning. And I think what this will cause is almost a change in mindset. I think previously, sure, you could get a lot done in a short amount of time if you had a few partners. I think this is going to create an environment where we are going to have to be intricately involved with our clients, what their projects are, when are they breaking ground, working with designers, who are working so far ahead of when construction start or when a ground is broken, because of that forward planning in order to offset cost and offset lead time.
right. So another thing that you mentioned to me, which I kind of honed in on, I was like, let's talk about that, is you had said, you never thought you would have to get down to this granular level of the supply chain.
Correct.
And I have heard that from others. So tell me what that looks like for you.
For me, what that has looked like over the past 18 months is truly understanding to the granular level of where my materials come from. So in textiles, just to give you an example, last year, polyester had a shortage. Polyester is created, and these are things that I've worked with, for 20 years, but didn't know, at a finite detail. So last year, there was a shortage of polyester, and this was due to polyester is created through a byproduct of petroleum. Well, last year, when the world stopped making gasoline, the yarn supplier ran low of the raw material it takes to extrude the polyester that becomes the yarn, that becomes woven into the gray goods, that becomes what we dye, we print, we finish. So really having to track from a global standpoint where the chemicals are coming from. It was just something I never expected to have to learn or to have to track on a daily, weekly basis.
Right. Now, are you what I consider a multi-line rep?
I am currently, yes.
Okay, do you want to give me a brief shout out of those vendors that you're repping for?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Andrea Hubbard. I am with Interior Insights Group, and we represent artwork from Society 6. We represent case goods from Morgan Lee. We represent Activate, which is installation for all of those beautiful products that go into our hotels, and then also for Design Form, which is seating in hotels and restaurants.
Thank you. Okay, guys, Andrea knows her stuff. So if you have questions, give her a call. Andrea, what's the best number they can reach you at?
My number is 214-814-4105.
Andrea, thank you so much for doing this. Finally, everybody, I talked to Lindley Shepard. Lindley is the marketing manager of Viridian Wood, and she had some very interesting things to say about these issues as well. She admits that they have been experiencing labor shortages and raw material supply chain issues. They have seen an uptick of sales year to date, but it's been hard to meet the demand with the struggles they've been facing. And at one point last month, they were at half labor and struggling to get orders out the door under 2 months. Now, Lindley says that is getting better and they have seen some new hires come in, but the struggles are real. These and other challenges in the supply chain are the types of things that I love to discuss and find solutions to. If you have a topic you'd like to know more about, then reach out to me. If you'd like to sponsor a podcast, I would love to hear from you. Today's podcast and every day's podcast is sponsored by Procuresmart. Procuresmart is a boutique purchasing agency in the hospitality commercial space. We're small, but we're mighty with over 22 years of purchasing experience. We're experienced enough to handle any size project and small enough to work within any size budget. You'll never be treated as just another project. Your top priority will be our top priority. Reach out to us if we can help with a simple lobby renovation or a whole new hotel construction. Stay tuned next week for a talk with Norman Hare with Elevate Business to Business. Norman will talk about starting up a new company in the last few months and what they're offering to make keeping hotels' inventory and television stable. If you've tried to order a guest room TV lately, you know that lead times are stretching out to 8 weeks. Norman says he has a solution, so tune in and let's support him.